Good evening, everybody. Our top stories. 3 days removed from Election Day, still no results in several major midterm races, those in Georgia, Arizona, and, of course, Florida. In Broward County and Palm Beach County, Governor Rick Scott winning a court order today. Judges ordering an immediate review of ballots in those two jurisdictions. Election officials have learned apparently nothing about electoral integrity and public responsibilities in those two counties. In short, they're a disgrace.
Look at Broward County. They have had a horrible history. And if you look at the person, in this case a woman, involved, she has had a horrible history. And all of a sudden, they're finding votes out of nowhere. And Rick Scott, who won by, it was close, but he won by a comfortable margin. Every couple of hours, it goes down a little bit. Look. There's bad things have gone on in Broward County, really bad things. She's been to court. She's had a lot of problems. She's lost.
We'll take up those officials, the charges of rigged elections and pervasive corruption. Congressman Matt Gaetz, former Bush White House staffer Brad Blakeman, political savant, political strategist Ed Rollins, who knows a thing or two about recounts. Also tonight, China and the global elites on Wall Street banding together, trying to pressure the Trump administration into making trade and immigration concessions that would undercut much that the president has already accomplished to help American workers. Asia expert Gordon Chang joins us tonight. We'll be discussing the U.S.-China relationship. And in California, rapidly moving wildfires have burned structures to the ground, already claimed the lives of at least 5 people, their bodies found in their burned out vehicles.
The magnitude of the destruction that we are seeing is really, again, unbelievable and heartbreaking. And currently, we have roughly about 105,000 people evacuated in Southern California. We know that there have been injuries, and we know that there have been loss of life.
This is one of the deadliest wildfires in California history already. We'll have the latest for you on those fires and the efforts to stop them later in the broadcast. Our top story, President Trump and the First Lady have arrived in Paris. There they will be commemorating the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. They'll be in France through at least Sunday afternoon, and Chief White House correspondent John Roberts with them in Paris to cover the ceremonies and the president.
Well, good evening, Lou. President Trump finds himself embroiled in a brand new legal battle as a civil rights organization files suit against President Trump's efforts to restrict asylum claims in the United States. But the president is vowing to do everything he can to stem the tide of illegal immigration. Departing the White House this morning, President Trump threw more fuel on the immigration fire, saying he had started the process to deny asylum claims made by illegal immigrants.
I just signed the proclamation on asylum, very important. People can come in, but they have to come in through the ports of entry. And that, to me, is a very important thing.
The action drew an instant lawsuit from the ACLU, but the president got immediate backup from his acting attorney general, Matt Whitaker, in a statement saying, today the president has made a strong statement that enough is enough. Thanks to this decisive order from President Trump, we are continuing to provide a path to protection for those who truly need it while stopping our generosity from being abused.
I reiterate, we need Democrats' votes. They have to pass new immigration laws because they're flooding our country. We're not letting them in, but they're trying to flood our country.
President Trump will be in Paris to mark the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. While the president will have a bilateral meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, a sit-down with Russian President Vladimir Putin has been put off until later this month.
Well, I'll meet with Putin at the G20. I don't know that we're seeing each other in Paris, but there may be a lunch for the leaders.
Fox News is told that after President Trump returns from Paris, he and his attorneys will make a decision whether to submit to an interview with special counsel Robert Mueller.
Right now, I'm thinking about the world. I'm not thinking about sit-downs or not sit-downs.
The president's legal team has prepared written answers to several questions about the Russia collusion issue, but President Trump hasn't yet decided whether he'll give them to Mueller.
There was no collusion. It's a whole hoax.
On his way to Paris aboard Air Force One, the president weighed in on congressional efforts to protect the Mueller investigation with legislation, taking aim at Arizona Republican Jeff Flake, tweeting, "Jeff Flake doesn't want to protect the non-Senate confirmed special counsel. He wants to protect his future after being unelectable in Arizona for the crime of doing a terrible job." And President Trump also railed against the decision by an Obama-appointed district judge in Montana to block his plans to build the Keystone XL pipeline.
Well, it was a political decision made by a judge. I think it's a disgrace.
But President Trump did see as good news a ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals against his plan to end the so-called DACA program. Good news because the president says it now kicks it to the Supreme Court, where he has just cemented a comfortable 5-4 conservative majority. Lou?
John, thanks very much. John Roberts reporting from Paris. Now to a contest that could be decided not by voters, but by the courts. Attorneys are now motioning and monitoring and amid charges and allegations of wrongdoing, those flying in the Florida Senate contest between Governor Rick Scott and Senator Bill Nelson. Fox News correspondent Phil Keating keeping track of it all in Miami.
Don't touch her!
In Florida, the election fervor is red hot. Two key races for U.S. Senate and governor appear destined for an automatic recount.
What's going on in Florida is a disgrace.
Every Floridian should be concerned.
Republican Governor Rick Scott, who's in the contested Senate race against incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson, filed a lawsuit against Broward and Palm Beach counties. He alleges rampant fraud.
I am the senator-elect in the state, and so we're just unfortunately having to go through this process because the Democrats are trying to steal this seat.
Broward County Supervisor of Elections Brenda Snipes remains defiant that nothing improper occurred. Snipes is no stranger to controversy, though. A judge ruled her office destroyed ballots in a 2016 House race, and in another instance, she was accused of mishandling absentee ballots. Still, she maintains the governor's lawsuit had no merit.
We ran 22 sites. We ran 14 days. We ran 12 hours. We had a big vote by mail. So don't try to turn it around to make it seem like I'm making comedy out of this.
Nelson filed his own lawsuit demanding the state count all provisional and mail-in ballots that show a signature mismatch. And late today accused his opponent of abusing his public office by not ensuring all votes are counted.
Clearly, Rick Scott is trying to stop all the votes from being counted, and he's impeding the democratic process.
And Mark Elias, an attorney for Nelson's team, expressed confidence the numbers will eventually turn on their side.
If I had to place a bet, I would say that it is more likely than not that Senator Nelson will prevail in a recount.
If that name sounds familiar, Elias is a longtime Democratic operative working with Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign and who hired Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm that produced the infamous anti-Trump dossier. In one of a half dozen tweets Friday on the controversy, the president calls Elias an election-stealing lawyer and warns against what he calls the Broward effect. If this wasn't enough, a recount appears just as likely in the governor's race. Democrat Andrew Gillum, seeking to be the first African-American to lead his state, conceded the race Tuesday night to Republican Ron DeSantis, but is now reconsidering that decision, which isn't binding. Gillum responded to Trump's tweet that the situation in Florida was a nationwide embarrassment with a tweet of his own. What's embarrassing to democracy is not counting every vote. And you, of course. The unofficial election results from all 67 counties are now due at noon on Saturday in Tallahassee. And if the Secretary of State determines that the margin of victory in any of these races is less than 0.5%, that automatically triggers a recount. And we firmly expect most county offices to be staffed, waiting for that order to start feeding the machines one more time. Lou?
Bill, thanks very much. Phil Keating. There's also been a big court ruling in Arizona that extends any decision on that Senate race between Republican Martha McSally and Democrat Kirsten Sinema. Extends it for at least a few days. New numbers tonight show Sinema widening her lead to more than 21,000 votes, leading 49.36 to McSally's 48.31. Correspondent Dan Springer in Phoenix right now and has the details for us.
Lou, this vote count in the state of Arizona remains tight. Kirsten Sinema still holds a 9,000 vote lead. That's about 0.5% with roughly 450,000 votes left to be counted. We thought we were going to have some legal drama today, but a short time ago, a settlement was announced. The Republican Party sued to get Maricopa County to stop curing ballots that had a problem with signatures. Officials say most counties throw those ballots out if they can't be verified by Election Day. But then the GOP backed down, allowing the process to continue through next Wednesday. The party chairman was still on offense before today's hearing.
The Democrats' legal strategy is clear, as it is troubling. They want to disenfranchise 11 counties they can't win.
President Trump must have been unaware of the settlement when he tweeted today, quote, "Just out in Arizona, signatures don't match electoral corruption. Call for a new election. We must protect democracy." So this first count of votes will continue unchanged, possibly through next week here in Maricopa County, where long vote counts are routine.
Just like in all the other 3,000 counties in the United States, we run our operation, they run their operation. We're constitutionally elected officers. I wanted to make sure that I got every voter's signature validated if we could, so that I could get every ballot counted if I could.
The trend in Maricopa County has to make Democrats feel good. Sinema saw her 8,000 vote lead jump to 27,000 late yesterday. And if that trend continues through the weekend, this red Jeff Flake seat will turn blue. Lou?
Dan, thank you very much. Dan Springer from Phoenix. Seems like there are troubles all over the country. Up next, the national left-wing media refuses to believe their radical dim cohorts could actually lose an election.
Brian Kemp, the right thing to do, please win fair and square.
This is third world country stuff coming from the Republican Party.
The elections are not over. We're still seeing results trickle in, and they're going for the Democrats.
The thought of kind of using executive power to try to interfere with the post-election counting is a clear and present warning sign about what we may be looking at 2 years down the road.
That they're arguing essentially that the election was stolen, and Governor Scott using the words rampant fraud, it sounds a little bit Trumpian.
We'll take all of that up after the break. Congressman Matt Gaetz joins us. Stay with us. We're coming right back.
Lou's success story continued. Keep choosing Dobbs. That's why the #1 show on business television is Lou Dobbs Tonight.
Hi. Well, let's take a look at the so-called balance of power in the Senate. The Senate races in Florida, Arizona, which look like they're headed for recounts, is certainly in Florida, and Mississippi, where a runoff election will be held November 27th. We have to acknowledge that this is the current Senate balance of power and may be adjusted. The balance of power stands with Republicans in charge right now, 51-46. If the Republicans were to sweep the three races, obviously, they would have a majority of 54-46. If the Democrats sweep, the Republican majority would descend to 2 seats, and these are the stakes that we're looking at now. One of the people who holds the outcome in her hands is Florida Democrat and Broward County Supervisor of Elections. She's Brenda Snipes. Snipes has just a sordid history in her 15 years in office. In 2016, Snipes' destruction of primary ballots while they were subject to a lawsuit. She also violated the law in 2016 when her office posted early voting results before the polls closed. And in 2004, her office had to send 58,000 absentee ballots to voters who requested but failed to receive them. Wow. Our next guest is criticizing Broward County for the mysteriously appearing ballots in this election 3 days after Tuesday's elections. He's now calling for the removal of her, the Supervisor of Elections, Brenda Snipes. Congressman Gaetz says Snipes has failed to follow state transparency laws. Joining me now, Congressman Matt Gaetz, member of the House Judiciary and Armed Services Committee. Congressman, I've got to say, looking at her record, what in the world is she doing in the job?
Lou, it's like we've got a banana republic down here in Broward County. Just hours ago, a judge ruled that Brenda Snipes violated the Florida Constitution by not allowing citizens to have access to basic records that were supposed to be produced. Easy stuff, Lou, like how many ballots were cast and who cast them and where were they cast. This is something that almost every other supervisor of elections, 65 out of 67, were able to get all of this information right in a matter of hours. We're now days later. Brenda Snipes, after getting a court order that she had to allow us to inspect that information, well, the deadline for that court order was 7 o'clock, the top of your show, and she has not complied with it. So when I'm done here, we're going to go and get motions for contempt prepared, and we're going to be back in front of a judge to hold Brenda Snipes in contempt of court for not following court orders and not following the Florida Constitution. The question is, what is Governor Rick Scott going to do about it? I think he needs to immediately suspend her and put this office into the receivership of the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is the chief elections officer in Florida and was confirmed by a broad bipartisan majority of the Florida Senate. This lady cannot do the job. She is either incompetent or corrupt, and I don't want to wait around and find out which it is.
Well, it might be both.
It could be.
It's stunning to me that she's still in office. How could that be after what she has not done, what she has done? As you pointed out, she defied a court order, broke her constitutional duty. I mean, what more does she have to do?
That is a really appropriate question for Governor Rick Scott. I hope that Governor Rick Scott isn't scared that since he's a candidate, he shouldn't fulfill the duties of the governor, because 8 million ballots were cast in Florida, Lou, and my constituents who did it right, my supervisors of elections who followed the law, we should not have our votes diluted by the corruption and by the terrible illegal behavior here in Broward County. This is always the place where it's a problem, and it's because the people working in this building are either too stupid or too corrupt to do their job. So I think we ought to remove them immediately, and then we ought to have the state's Secretary of State come in, put the office in receivership, and I think America deserves to know how many people voted in Broward County. I think we deserve to know whether or not they voted in person or absentee or vote by mail, because only that transparency allows us to be able to identify voter fraud and ballot stuffing and illegal activity. If you play hide the ball with the ballots, then we can never catch you committing the fraud.
Well, exactly right. But I mean, here we go again. It's been 18 years since the Gore v. Bush, and here we are with Broward and Palm Beach County in much the same position. It must be a strong
Yeah, you mentioned
habit.
Palm Beach, Lou. Earlier today, Palm Beach County lost a case in court because they were allowing the supervisor of elections to unilaterally decide whether or not damaged ballots would be counted or not counted. In Florida, the law requires the canvassing board to make that decision. So they're making up their own rules down here in Palm Beach and Broward. They've literally spoken 80,000 ballots into existence. We have no chain of custody for those ballots. We have no reconciliation of the ballots that were voted versus left blank. And this is the ecosystem that allows corruption to flourish. And I'm here to make sure it doesn't happen, because my constituents didn't do it wrong, and our votes shouldn't be diluted by corruption and malfeasance in Palm Beach and Broward County.
Well, good luck to you. Good luck to the Republican Party. By the way, assure me, there are GOP attorneys running all over that place now, right?
I can tell you this, I've seen a number of Democrats come in and out of the office. They have armed security guards outside that stopped me when I wanted to take video of something being loaded in and out of trucks here at the very office. And so these are really bizarre tactics that they're using. And you know what, Lou? It's because they've probably screwed it up. I don't know if there was fraud or if there was just incompetence, but either way, it's really bad news in there. And we better make sure that this election is not stolen from the people of Florida who elected Republicans. You know, this is the new path of the resistance, Lou. They tried to disrupt our town halls. We passed tax reform anyway. The economy grew. They said there was going to be a blue wave. We met it with a red wall. And now they're trying to steal the elections that they can't win with the voters.
Well, early voting, but one thing is being made very clear in much of the country is the count continues for quite some time. This is extraordinary. And Congressman Matt Gaetz, it's always good of you to be with us. We appreciate it. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
The president today putting another anti-Trump CNN reporter in their place. Unbelievable. Tearing into CNN's Abby Phillip during a press gaggle outside the White House. Listen to this.
Do you expect Matt Whitaker to be involved in the Russia probe? Do you want him to...
That's up to him.
Do you want him to rein in Robert Mueller?
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
Oh, we're just wondering. I don't know where they find these reporters over there. I don't know how they come up with these questions. I don't know why anybody puts up with them at all at the White House. Be sure to vote in tonight's poll. Our question is, do you think any reasonable person would support voter ID laws to ensure electoral integrity? We're just curious. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. It seems like voter ID laws would make so much sense, but the courts say no. But those courts are not necessarily objective on the issue. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs tonight. Still ahead here, the latest from California. 2 wildfires are moving at an alarming pace, absolutely out of control, and just devastating. More on the controversial recounts, of course, that are looming in Florida, and we'll take that up right after the break with Greg Jarrett and Brad Blakeman. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Geico makes it so easy.
ACLU, the left-wing activist organization that has a tax exemption, is now seeking a court injunction against the president's new restrictions on asylum. And, oh yes, catch and release is over as well. They claim the policy violates federal immigration law. No word yet from Senator Dianne Feinstein, who advised President Obama to use, quote, very broad powers to limit asylum back in 2014, the very foundation for the president's proclamation and order. Joining me now to talk about the president's asylum proclamation, as well as what is pretty clearly election fraud in Broward County. I know you're thinking, say it isn't so, and Palm Beach County. Former member of President George W. Bush's senior staff, Brad Blakeman. Brad was in Florida in those days, representing the Bush team during the 2000 presidential recount. Brad, good to have you with us.
Pleasure.
Greg Jarrett, Fox legal analyst and author of the New York Times bestseller, The Russia Hoax. And I've got to start, if I may, Greg, with you, because everybody's talking about Russia collusion and intervention in our elections, and we've got obvious fraud in good old Florida.
Yeah. I mean, the either corruption or incompetence is now consumed Broward County at the hands of Brenda Snipes, who a judge several months ago found that she had unlawfully destroyed ballots. Governor Scott has himself to blame. She cannot be recalled as an elected official under their laws, but the governor could have suspended her as her predecessor was suspended for corruption. And
that governor was?
And that governor was Jeb Bush. So Governor Scott should have taken a cue from Governor Bush and suspended Brenda.
Or maybe just the idea that if you've got an election supervisor destroying ballots, you probably should replace them.
It's unbelievable.
So you would say he has himself to blame?
He has himself to blame for this. And, his lawsuit was well crafted, convinced the judge. So a step in the right direction. The judge has now ordered Snipes to disclose information. She's already missed the deadline. No surprise there. She is either profoundly stupid and incompetent or she's corrupt. It's one of the two.
As I suggested to Congressman Matt Gaetz, there is a looming possibility of both. That seems to me to be a fair calculation as well. I don't even understand why the citizens, unless the citizens of Broward and Palm Beach County are so left-wing, that they think this is amusing.
They voted for her. And so they have themselves to blame as well, unless, of course, they love the fact that Snipes may be somehow discovering and inventing new ballots. That's a possibility.
Brad, your thoughts on this? You went through it. Who wins it?
Well, my hope is that they will not be successful, just as Gore was not successful in trying to steal the election from the obvious winner. Now, the numbers were a lot different. Obviously, we went in with 537 votes, and you're talking about tens of thousands of votes in this case. And it's always funny how they always seem to find Democratic votes, and it's always the usual suspects in a 67-county state. It always comes down to Broward and Palm Beach County. And we know from firsthand experience.
They got more commitment.
Unbelievable. You know, trunks of cars, they stash ballots. In closets, they stash ballots.
So why would the Republican Party, Brad, not have monitors there, attorneys already by the semi-truckload ready in those two counties to let people know that this is just not going to happen again?
Look, they should have. Obviously, they were not as attentive as they should have been. Some of the poll watchers are volunteers. They're neighbors. They don't have the kind of experience. They don't know what to look for.
I'm talking about hired junkyard dog attorneys.
You bet. That's exactly what they should have done. And it wasn't done. And now they have to do it. But it may be too late in some circumstances. Right. But one thing's for sure is we may have courts again deciding an election. This is not the way things are supposed to happen in our country.
I want to take up very quickly, if we may, Greg, the president's proclamation.
Yes.
Ending catch and release and severely restricting asylum to the ports of entry and denying it to anyone who crosses illegally.
Catch and release is a policy. It's administered by the executive branch and the president. He's perfectly entitled to revoke it. As for the ports of entry, the president's proclamation is the exact same as his travel ban, which was upheld by the Supreme Court. It's the Immigration Act.
And even more important, recommended to President Obama by none other than Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah, so the president's authorized it. And by the way, the ACLU doesn't have standing to sue, but it's the ACLU.
Brad, very quickly, your thoughts on it?
Right on to the president. The president is doing his duty and upholding his oath to protect us. And look, it's going to be challenged in the courts, and hopefully we will find the right judges. And if we don't, we have the Supremes. And if it gets there, I am sure, as Greg properly pointed out, that it will be upheld in the highest court of the land if it gets there, and probably it will.
All right. Greg Jarrett, Brad Blakeman, good to have you both here. Thank you. Appreciate it. Still ahead, more on the deadly wildfires destroying thousands of acres in California, plus the latest on the radical Dems' efforts to manipulate elections and steal power. We take that up next with Ed Rollins. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It's easy to think.
Breaking news tonight from California, where President Trump has just approved a disaster declaration as firefighters battle two major out-of-control wildfires. Look at these pictures. They're astonishing. These fast-moving flames have killed at least 5 people now. Thousands of homes, commercial buildings are in danger of burning. More than 100,000 people have been evacuated. Thousands of residents in Malibu, the fire overtaking some of their homes. Joining us now to discuss the Democratic efforts, it seems, to force recounts wherever they can. They want the races closed, but it's the way they get there that has a number of people concerned. And among those concerned, top Republican strategist, top strategist for Great America PAC, former Reagan White House political director, Fox Business political analyst. Great to have you with us.
In the course of my lifetime, I've lost assembly races where someone finds a bag of votes about 4 weeks, 8 weeks after the election of 300, 400 that fell off a truck somewhere. And that sounds like the way it's going down in Florida. Florida always has this premise, especially these two big counties, which is where the Democrats are, of finding votes after the fact and never being able to give you a full count. And the idea that a court said that she had to basically by 7 o'clock allow people in there and have and she just violates it. She just moves right on.
She told the judge, go to hell.
That's what she did. And, just.
So now the judge says he gets mad at being told to go to hell and she doesn't comply with the order. He writes another order, and that's ignored, and the Republicans are sitting around with their hands in their pocket doing nothing.
Right. In the same way in Arizona, we're now behind 21,000 in the Senate race there. And there's another,
Well, the good news there, at least there's 500,000. We know there's about 500,000 votes still to be counted.
Still to be counted. And why aren't they counted? I mean, the The reality is, if you know these are all the early voting, most people think that when you do the early voting, it gets counted. It doesn't get counted until after everything else gets counted.
That makes a lot of sense. Early voting, late counting.
Right, and sometimes what people don't realize, if a race is not close, they don't get counted. They don't get counted for weeks and weeks, and it's just...
This is a bit of a departure, but not too much. The idea of early voting,
right,
that has overtaken much of the country, extends election day across weeks and weeks, right. And we're left with this situation where election day is no longer election day. No. And it sounds like, and looks like, and feels like a recipe for immense fraud on the part of the...
Well, it's coming. I mean, I think there's a lot of fraud that goes on already, and I think more and more are coming as time goes on.
So what's the rationale for this? This makes no sense. Either have a vote or don't have a vote. Well, why not have voter ID, for crying out loud? I know the answer to the question.
I'm all for that. I also think, to a certain extent, in these national elections, the federal government has a role, not to take over the day-to-day. No, but just in the sense of the law enforcement side of it and what have you. And the Civil Rights Act has always had people in there making sure that people's rights aren't being violated. But there's a lot of other people who don't fall on the civil rights.
That's a great point. I mean, think about this. I mean, they've got these consent decrees for some police departments. Right. But Broward and Palm Beach County have been, fraudulent and incompetent for years, decades, and the Justice Department is nowhere to be found. Why don't they get a consent decree from those folks?
Right. And equally as important, this supervisor, Dr. Sykes, has already been attacked many times, and even Debbie Wasserman, she basically destroyed the votes.
Oh, wait a minute. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is from Broward County, and she's also the chair of the DNC who was thrown out for corruption?
Yes. That's
it's nice to see a culture grow up, isn't it?
And she was challenged a few years ago, and the challenger wanted to do a post-election, and they destroyed all the ballots.
Well, did anybody go to jail?
No one went to jail.
No arrest record or anything?
And no one got fired.
Did anybody get a gold star and a bag of cash?
I'm sure if you're the winning.
So what happens here?
I think this is going to go down. It's going to be 2 weeks of real battle. It'll be very similar to 210.
Is it going to be one-sided, or will the Republican attorneys show up?
I assume there's somebody down there already, but I shouldn't make that assumption. I assume someone will be down there and prepared. But we're really 2 weeks away from this thing ever being resolved. 2 weeks after.
Whose favor?
I hope in our favor, because we obviously won on Election Day, so we'll see.
But Election Day doesn't include early voting and late counting.
Right.
What was it Stalin said? You can vote, let me count.
And you get into the holidays, and people pay less and less attention.
Yeah. So amazing. Ed, as always,
thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Coming up next, President Trump's tough talk about China's predatory trade practices.
China would have superseded us in 2 years as an economic power. Now they're not even close.
Just remember, we're the bank. We're the bank that everybody wants to steal from and plunder. And it can't be that way anymore. We are going to end the theft of American intellectual property, crack down on China's trade abuses, and confront countries that cheat. We have taken historic action to bring back American jobs by cracking down on China's abusive trade practices.
Now, believe it or not, there are some in America, American business, who are trying to undercut the president's policies. Gordon Chang joins us here next with more on what the Trump administration has done for American workers and what they must contend with in that administration now from Wall Street. Stay with us.
King is gone.
There is a battle, an intense battle underway that is often outside the eyesight and earshot of most Americans. White House National Trade Council Director Peter Navarro talking at the Center for Strategic and International Studies today, and he fired a clear warning shot at Wall Street and globalist elites who are now engaged in effectively subverting the Trump administration on U.S.-China trade.
When these unpaid foreign agents engage in this kind of diplomacy, so-called diplomacy, All they do is weaken this president and his negotiating position. No good can come of this. If there is a deal, if and when there is a deal, it will be on President Donald J. Trump's terms, not Wall Street terms. But if Wall Street is involved and continues to insinuate itself into these negotiations, there will be a stench around any deal that's consummated, because it will have the imprimatur of Goldman Sachs and Wall Street. So I would urge these unpaid foreign agents to stand down on this issue. No good can come of it. If they want to do good, then spend their billions in Dayton, Ohio, in the factory towns of America, where we need a rebirth of our manufacturing base and an end to the opioid crisis, which they helped create by offshoring our production.
And the Chinese, by shipping tons of it, fentanyl, for example, into this country. Joining me now to take all of this up, the global elite's efforts to influence President Trump's trade negotiations to really subvert the administration. Gordon Chang, he's author of The Coming Collapse of China in place of the nuclear showdown. Let me turn first to this, and let's start with two words that a lot of people are right now hearing more of than we've heard in some time. One is globalist, and the other is nationalist. And some people are wondering, why did the national left-wing media attack the president when he used the word nationalist and then try to attach some sort of pejorative or racial connotation to it, when in fact a nationalist is a man or woman who stands up for the nation in which they live. A globalist is obviously someone concerned about the international order, a one world order, in most instances.
Yeah,
fair summation?
Yeah, the important thing here, Lou, is that President Trump's tariffs are imposed as a remedy to stop the theft of our intellectual property. Because we've got an innovation-based economy now, and if we cannot commercialize that, the Chinese are going to dominate the 21st century. This is theft to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars a year, and this is what President Trump is doing.
As much as $600 billion a year. That's larger than the trade deficit with China.
Yeah. So clearly, when you look at the reality of what he's doing, forget about the labels for a moment. He's defending the American economy, the American worker, and American business.
The American way is what this president is doing on every level. He is defending its borders. He is, by the way, trying to impose law and order, to support law enforcement, build a strong military. For what purpose? To defend the nation and the American citizens who live in it. How complicated is that, except for those who obfuscate and want to change and police language so that people don't understand that this is a fight. It is an existential fight, in my judgment, for this country against the predators of China, primarily, and he has to win it. And by the way, we wouldn't even be engaged in it. Goldman Sachs and the so-called elites of Wall Street would be selling everything out to China they could find. By the way, just like they've done to American industry for some time, vis-a-vis China.
Yeah. Peter Navarro started an important conversation that this nation has to have, and that is we've got a big segment of the financial services community much too comfortable advocating Beijing's positions. And essentially what we're talking about, as we said, intellectual property theft. We need somebody to defend the American worker, the American creator of IP. And this is what we're talking about. So I think that essentially what Peter has been saying is it's important for us to go forward to defend the president, because this is, as you say, an existential fight.
Think about how sinister and insidious all of this is, because you have right now a symposium run by Bloomberg in China. Here is a man who's potentially a presidential candidate conducting effectively foreign policy, and the Chinese are using that as a agency of propaganda. And as you listen to these returning Wall Street executives, I mean, it's like they're speaking from the very same talking points.
Yeah, at this Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Singapore, we have heard a number of people from the U.S. financial community say, oh, we should negotiate with the Chinese. Well, personally, I'm not prepared to negotiate with the Chinese about how much intellectual property theft we will accept.
Right.
We should be accepting zero. That's our initial position. That's our final position. Zero.
Well said. And Robert Lighthizer, Peter Navarro, and others, Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, are doing a splendid job. And we know that there are elements of the president's cabinet who want to sell it out against this president's policy initiatives. It's an extraordinarily dangerous time for this country. And Wall Street, I would say they should be ashamed of themselves, but they're not. They think they're clever and cute, and they're going to make a lot of money. That part is true, but it usually means when they do that a lot of others have lost even more. Thanks so much. Good to see you. Up next, elections still undecided in Florida, Arizona, and oh yes, a runoff in Mississippi. Ballots still being counted, blame certainly being thrown around. We'll have the latest for you from Florida, and oh man, doesn't this take you back? They're counting Chads in Broward County. No, that's not really Chads. It's electronic. We're updating. It's a modernized electoral system. We'll be right back. Stay with us.